My name is Cora Marshall. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a city that smells of rain and roses, a place where the sky is often a soft, forgiving gray. I own a small branding agency I built from the ground up, from a laptop on my thrift store coffee table to a bright, airy studio downtown with a team I cherish. For the last decade, however, I have held another, less formal position. I have been my family's quiet benefactor, their silent partner in a life I was never fully invited to live. It began subtly, as these things often do. A whisper of need, a gentle pressure. It started with my younger brother, Nathan, needing a few $100s to fix the sputtering engine of his first car. Then it was a contribution to our parents' leaky roof. Then Dad's dental implants, Mom's emergency vet bill for their aging golden retriever. It evolved into Nathan's tuition for a graphic design course he never finished, then his rent when he decided to find himself for a year. Each request was wrapped in the soft gauze of love and obligation. "You're so good with money," Cora, Mom would say, her voice a warm, familiar melody on the phone. "We just don't know what we'd do without you." And I, wanting to be the good daughter, the reliable sister, always said yes. I said yes because I could, and because a part of me believed that my success was a resource to be shared, a well from which my family could draw. I was proud of my independence, of the life I had carved out for myself without a traditional path. I'd skipped university, pouring my energy and meager savings into my business idea, working weekends and late nights until my vision took root and blossomed. I thought my hard-won stability was a gift I could offer them. I didn't realize it was becoming an excuse for their perpetual instability. The more I gave, the less they saw of me. They saw the results of my work, the comfortable balance in my bank account, but they never saw the work itself. They didn't visit my first office, a tiny, windowless room above a bakery. They didn't celebrate when I landed my first major client. They never asked about the projects that lit me up inside, the challenges that kept me awake at night, or the quiet joy of creating something beautiful and lasting. I was Cora, the one who could handle it, the one who was fine. I slowly transformed from a person into a utility, a convenient solution to life's inconvenient problems. By the time Nathan announced his engagement to Sophie, I was no longer a daughter or a sister. I was simply the sponsor. The wedding planning began with a phone call that felt as soft and unassuming as all the others. "Darling," Sophie found the most magical place. Mom's voice floated through the receiver. "A vineyard in the Willamette Valley. It's absolutely breathtaking, but just a little out of their reach. It would mean the world to them, to all of us, if you could just help with the deposit." Just the deposit. I knew, even then, that it would never be just the deposit. But I heard the hope in her voice, the vision of a perfect day for her son, and I said what I always said. "Of course, Mom." That yes was a loose thread, and once pulled, the entire tapestry began to unravel. The deposit was followed by the caterer, an artisanal farm-to-table outfit with a per-head cost that made my breath catch. Then came the photographer, whose ethereal light package was apparently non-negotiable. The florist had a steep minimum for on-site arrangements. Sophie had found the dress, a cascade of silk and hand-sewn lace that was 3 times their stated budget. "She just wept when she put it on," Cora, Mom had explained. "You know that feeling." It was the one. I didn't know that feeling, but I paid the invoice anyway. And Nathan? He deserves to look his best, standing up there, Dad had chimed in. So a bespoke suit was commissioned from a tailor in the Pearl District. Each request arrived with that familiar, gentle coercion, not a demand, but an assumption. The unspoken mantra, "You can, so you should." And because I could, I did. Within a month, I was drowning in the logistics of a wedding that was not my own. The event planner, a brisk woman named Elena, had my number on speed dial, not my parents' or Nathan's. I was the point of contact for everything. I found myself on a conference call discussing linen swatches while trying to finalize a client's brand guide. I negotiated with the rental company about the specific vintage of their glassware. I was the maid of honor without the title, the best man without the speech. I told myself it was for them. It was their moment. But a strange, hollow feeling was beginning to settle in my chest. Whose day was it, really? When the guest list swelled to over 200 people and a signature cocktail named the Nathan and Sophie was chosen without anyone even asking my opinion, I started to see the whole affair in stark, numerical terms. I caught myself mentally calculating the cost of the champagne flutes during a dinner with friends. I knew the exact price of each Chiavari chair they had rented. By the time they'd booked a string quartet to play during the cocktail hour, I had stopped asking for the cost because I knew the answer didn't matter to anyone but me. But the financial drain wasn't the deepest cut. It was the invisibility. It was being CC'd on an email chain with the subject line, "Final touches," and realizing my only role was to approve the payment at the bottom. It was seeing the save-the-date cards they'd send out, thanking our wonderful parents for their love and support. I suppose my support was something else entirely, something as invisible and essential as the electricity that would power the fairy lights. By then, I'd already paid for the sunset. The day of the wedding arrived with a soft, promising light, the kind of Oregon day that feels like a gift. The vineyard was nestled in the rolling hills of the valley, rows of lush, green vines stretching towards a hazy blue sky. As I drove up the gravel path, I could see the setting taking shape, a large white tent, clusters of wildflowers in rustic barrels, and strings of lights woven through the branches of ancient oak trees. It was, as my mother had promised, magical. The ceremony was scheduled for 5 o'clock. Guests began to arrive, draped in shades of sage green, dusty rose, and cream. Their laughter mingled with the delicate notes of a harpist playing by a stone fountain. I wasn't with them. I was standing behind the catering tent, on the phone with the rental company about a dozen missing tablecloths, my voice calm and firm as I sorted out the mistake. When I finally made my way to the ceremony area, the seats were nearly full. I scanned the seating chart, a beautifully calligraphed board resting on an easel. Table 1, the family table, had my parents, Sophie's parents, and a few close relatives. The wedding party filled tables 2 and 3. I found my name at table 12, tucked away in the back corner by the speakers and the gift table. My dinner companions were a distant second cousin of Sophie's who had flown in from Ohio and the photographer's young, earnest assistant. The cousin, whose name I couldn't recall, asked me what I did for a living with a polite, vacant smile, completely unaware that she was sipping a rose I had personally selected and paid for. I picked up a program from a small, beribboned basket. The cover was thick, creamy cardstock, embossed with a delicate vine motif. Nathan and Sophie, our story begins. Inside, there was an order of service, the lyrics to the song Sophie would walk down the aisle to, and a short, sweet history of their relationship. On the final page, under a heading that read, "With all our gratitude," was a list. They thanked their parents for their unending love. They thanked Sophie's best friend, Mia, for hand-lettering the place cards. They thanked Uncle Ben for building the beautiful wooden arbor they would stand under. My name was not there. It wasn't that I expected a monument, a grand announcement of my contributions. I have never been one for the spotlight. But to be erased completely, that felt different. That was a quiet, deliberate kind of severing. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I saw Sophie across the lawn, a vision in her silken gown, talking with her bridesmaids. She caught my eye and gave me a radiant, blissful smile. For her, everything was perfect. Perhaps it was. The string quartet began to play a soft, stirring rendition of Clair de Lune. A hush fell over the crowd. Nathan appeared, standing under the arbor beside our father. They were both impeccable in their tailored suits I had a receipt for in my email inbox. Nathan looked serene, confident, a man on the brink of his perfect future, utterly untouched by the frantic, behind-the-scenes ballet I had been conducting for months. I found my seat at table 12, poured myself a glass of Pinot Gris from the bottle that was already chilling there, and waited. I told myself that all I needed was one moment. One small nod, one shared glance of acknowledgement, one quiet thank you whispered when no one else was looking. Just a single sign that they saw me. It never came. What came instead was my father. After the vows were exchanged and the couple was pronounced husband and wife, after the thunderous applause and the joyful tears, he stepped up to the microphone for the first toast. He was already warm and flushed from a couple of glasses of scotch, holding the mic with a practiced, casual air. "Well, we all knew this day was coming," he began, his voice booming with paternal pride. "We always knew our Nathan would find someone as beautiful and kind as Sophie. He's got the charm, he's got the looks, and now, finally, he's got a wife who can keep him in line." The crowd laughed, a warm, appreciative sound. Nathan grinned, and Sophie blushed prettily, ducking her head. Dad raised his glass. "To the happy couple." After the toast, he didn't step away. He leaned back towards the mic, a playful glint in his eye. "Of course, we've still got our other child," he said, and his gaze swept the crowd until it landed squarely on me. I felt 100 pairs of eyes follow his. "Our Cora." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. It was a performer's pause, designed for effect. "She's not married," he announced, his tone light and teasing. "No kids. Never even finished college." He let out a chuckle, and it was echoed by a few people at the front tables. He turned his body slightly, making it a shared joke with the guests. Then he looked right at me, a wide grin on his face. "But hey," he said, his voice ringing out over the speakers, "at least she's good for picking up the tab." The laughter that followed was not polite or restrained. It was a wave of genuine, unrestrained amusement. It rolled through the tent, loud and bright. My brother, Nathan, threw his head back and laughed. Sophie, his new wife, giggled into her hand. My mother smiled, a tight, pained smile, as if to say, "Oh, that's just your father, you know how he is." I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still, my hand resting on the stem of my wine glass, and I felt something inside me crack. It wasn't a loud, shattering break, but a quiet, clean split. It was the final, chilling confirmation of a truth I had been avoiding for years. It wasn't just that they didn't see my sacrifices. They didn't see them as sacrifices at all. They saw them as my function, my purpose. A joke. In that moment, the years of quiet resentment, of feeling invisible, of biting my tongue, coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. I didn't scrape my chair or make a sound. I walked through the tables, my steps even and measured, until I reached the front where my father was still basking in the warmth of his joke. He saw me approaching and held out the microphone with that same infuriating grin, as if he expected me to play along, to be the good-natured, butt of his toast. I took the microphone from his hand, but I didn't look at him. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the fairy lights twinkling like a constellation of false stars, at my family, who were now watching me with expressions of mild confusion. My voice, when it came, was not loud. It was soft, steady, and clear enough to carry to the back of the tent. "He's right," I said. A confused silence fell over the crowd. "I'm not married," I continued, my gaze sweeping over them. "I don't have any children. And I never got a degree. But I do have a few things he failed to mention. I have a business I built with my own 2 hands. I have my self-respect. And I have an excellent memory." I turned my head and looked directly at Nathan and Sophie, who were staring at me, their smiles frozen on their faces. "And that wedding you're enjoying so much? The one that was my gift to you." I let a small, calm smile touch my lips. "Consider the gift rescinded. The final bills are all yours." I didn't wait for the gasps, the outrage, the denial. I didn't need to. I handed the microphone to the stunned DJ, turned my back on the entire scene, and walked away. I walked past the fountain, down the gravel path, and didn't look back. Behind me, the music did not resume. I heard a single, sharp cry of my name from my mother, not angry, Not pleading, but utterly bewildered. As if she truly, genuinely, had no idea how we had gotten here. And that, I realized, was the most heartbreaking part of all. They really didn't know. They had been taking pieces of me for so long, they never noticed I was becoming smaller. I didn't drive back to my apartment. I had known, on some subconscious level, that I wouldn't be able to return to a place filled with memories of them. 3 days earlier, I had booked a room at a quiet, boutique hotel in downtown Portland. A corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city lights and the dark, sleeping river. I let myself into the cool, silent room, dropped my clutch on a chair, and slipped off my heels. My feet ached. I should have felt a surge of power, a righteous blaze of anger. Instead, I felt a profound and hollow emptiness. It was the feeling of a limb that has been asleep for a long time, finally waking up with a painful, pins and needles numbness. I had been slowly drained for years, and tonight was simply the first time I had admitted to myself that I was empty. I opened my laptop, its familiar glow a small comfort in the dark room. I navigated to a bookmarked page, a secure online portal for a dedicated expense account. The account I had set up the day after Mom's first call about the vineyard. Nathan and Sophie were listed as authorized users, able to select vendors and make purchases. I had learned long ago, through smaller, less painful lessons, that generosity without documentation is easily forgotten, rewritten as a favor or a myth. This time, I had kept a meticulous paper trail. The invoice for Sophie's dress, the contract with the vineyard, the deposit for the band, every single line item was neatly filed, charged to a card that was under my name and my control. But they didn't know the most important detail. They assumed I had simply transferred a lump sum into the account. They never bothered to ask about the mechanics of it. They didn't know that I had structured it so that while they could initiate charges, every final payment, every large transfer, required my explicit, two-factor authenticated approval. And the largest payments, the final balances for the venue, the caterer, and the planner, were all scheduled to be processed the day after the wedding. I moved my cursor over the dashboard. A button, glowing a soft amber, read, "Pause all pending transactions." I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of my lungs all day, and I clicked it. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. The screen blinked once, and then the status of a half-dozen large payments shifted from scheduled to frozen. If I was only a checkbook to them, then the checkbook was now closed. The next morning, my phone, which had been on silent, lit up at 6:13 a.m. It was Mom. I let it vibrate twice against the polished wood of the nightstand before answering. Her voice was thin and reedy, the sound of a person who had either been up all night crying or up all night rehearsing. "Cora, where are you?" I didn't answer her question. I just listened to the hum of the city waking up outside my window. "Nathan." "Nathan said there was some kind of misunderstanding last night," she said, her voice wavering. "He said you made a scene." "No, Mom," I replied, my own voice surprisingly calm. "Dad made a scene. I just wrote the ending." There was a long, heavy exhale on the other end of the line. "You know how your father is. He jokes. He didn't mean it like that." "Sweetie, you can't possibly be serious about the money." "I'm not your bank anymore, Mom." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't confused or hurt. It was the cold, sharp silence of realization. The engine had just been turned off. I waited for the familiar tools to emerge, the guilt, the emotional plea, the reminder of family duty. It came, but weaker than usual, frayed around the edges. "Are you really going to abandon your brother like this?" On the first day of his marriage, a small, humorless smile touched my lips. "I paid for the champagne and the photographer," I said softly. "He'll have plenty of beautiful memories of the day it all began." And the day it all ended. I hung up the phone. By noon, the text messages had started. A timid one from Sophie. "Cora, I am so sorry about what your dad said. I had no idea. Can we please talk? Then one from Nathan, blunt and panicked. The venue just called. We need you. That one almost made me laugh. They hadn't needed me when they were tasting cakes. They hadn't needed me when they were planning their honeymoon in Greece. They hadn't needed me when they were drafting the guest list that relegated me to the back of the room. But now, with the bills coming due, I was suddenly essential again. At 4:17 p.m., the email I had been expecting arrived. The subject line was stark, urgent, outstanding balance for Marshall/Sophie wedding. Elena, the wedding planner, wrote that the final payment to the vineyard had been declined. She was professionally courteous, asking if there was a problem with the card and giving me a 48-hour window to resolve the issue before she would be contractually obligated to inform her clients of the default and begin legal proceedings. That was when I knew the next knock on my door wouldn't be about an apology. It would be about buying time. They had chosen the house for Nathan and Sophie a month before the wedding. Not that they had asked me. It had been dropped into a conversation with the casual air of a foregone conclusion. The three of us, my parents and I, were eating grilled fish on their deck, the salty air from the coast blowing inland. It was the Craftsman bungalow I had bought for them 3 years prior, a lovely old house with a sprawling garden in a quiet coastal town. They'd been on the verge of foreclosure after Dad's health scare, and I'd stepped in. I purchased the house outright, put it into a trust that I controlled, and let them live there, rent-free. My only condition was that they consult me on any major decisions regarding the property. We're thinking, Dad had said, poking at his fish, it's time we sign the house over to Nathan and the girl. Give them a proper start. I remember the weight of my fork as I set it down on my plate. Why would you do that? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Mom had chimed in, not missing a beat. Well, darling, he's starting a family. He needs that foundation. And you've always said you weren't interested in this old place. It was true. I wasn't interested in living there. But their assumption that it wasn't mine to be interested in was staggering. That's because I own it, I said, the words falling flatly into the evening air. Dad waved a dismissive hand. Semantics, Cora. It's a family asset. It's all in the family. I should have drawn the line right then with clear, indelible ink. But some wounded, hopeful part of me still believed it was just talk. It wasn't. While I was coordinating flower deliveries and finalizing catering numbers for the wedding, my parents had met with the lawyer to begin the process of transferring the deed. They never told me. They just assumed that, like always, I would eventually acquiesce. This time, however, I had more than just a vague sense of injustice. I had receipts. I had the trust documents. I called my lawyer, Clarice, a woman whose mind was as sharp as her tailored suits and who had zero patience for familial manipulation. The next morning, a concise, 2-page document was in my inbox. It was a formal notice of trust ownership, clearly stating that I was the sole trustee and that any attempt to transfer the property without my explicit, notarized consent would be considered fraudulent. I forwarded the PDF to my parents' email address. I didn't add a message. I just let the document speak for itself. 38 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dad. His voice was a low growl. You think you're being clever, don't you? No, I replied calmly. I think I'm being clear. You tried being clever last night at the wedding. This is the result. It was nearly 10 o'clock that night when the knock came at my hotel room door. It wasn't a frantic pounding or a timid tap. It was 3 solid, even knocks. I was curled on the sofa, watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. My phone was on silent. I muted the television and listened. In a hotel like this, at this hour, unexpected knocks were rare. After a moment, they came again. 3 more. Resolute. I set my tea down and walked to the door, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet. I peered through the peephole. It was Nathan. His suit jacket was rumpled, the same one from the ceremony. His tie was gone, and his hair was a mess. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from crying, but from the raw burn of stress. He was holding a thick manila folder. I didn't open the door. I didn't speak. He leaned his forehead against the wood, his voice low and strained. Cora, please. Just 5 minutes. Silence. I messed up, he said, his voice cracking. I know that. I was a coward. I laughed. It was easier to laugh. He let out a dry, humorless huff of air. Everything is falling apart. The venue is threatening to sue. Sophie's at her parents' house. Mom won't stop crying. I tried to sell the sound system we rented to cover the deposit on our apartment, but it turns out we never actually owned it. He paused, and his voice dropped to the quiet, pleading tone he used when we were children and he'd broken one of Mom's favorite vases. I know I don't deserve a thing from you. Not a thing. But I brought this. He held the folder up to the peephole. It's everything. The full wedding budget. I went through it all. I marked everything you paid for. Everything. My car payments for the last 2 years. The down payment for my so-called business. There's a letter in there, too. I wanted you to know that I saw it, even if I acted like I didn't. Still, I said nothing. He shifted his weight, his shoulder slumping against the door. I always looked up to you, you know. I still do. I just got so used to Dad's jokes, to everyone acting like your success was different, less real, because it didn't come with a husband and a diploma. But you built something, Cora. Something real. He waited. Please. Just read it. A long moment stretched between us, separated by a few inches of solid wood. Finally, I spoke, my voice muffled but clear. Leave it on the floor. I heard a soft sigh of what might have been relief. He didn't argue. He slid the folder under the door, the paper scuffing against the carpet. I watched his shadow retreat and disappear. I waited until the sound of the elevator doors chimed shut down the hall before I opened my own. The hallway was empty. The folder lay there like a peace offering, a white flag in a war I had never wanted to fight. I brought it inside and opened it. He had been telling the truth. It was filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and receipts, all meticulously organized. There were sticky notes in his familiar, messy handwriting. Dad insisted on this upgrade. Sophie's mom offered to pay, but Dad told her you had it covered. My fault, I never corrected him. At the very back was a single sheet of notebook paper, filled with that same scrawl. It wasn't an eloquent apology. It was raw and rambling, a confession of jealousy, of entitlement, of the lazy comfort of letting me carry the weight because it was easier than learning to stand on his own. It felt, for the first time in a long time, real. My laptop pinged with an incoming email notification. I walked over and saw the sender, Elena, the wedding planner. Subject: Escalation. Non-payment. Dear Ms. Marshall, further to my previous email, I am writing to inform you that a payment attempt was just made by your brother, Nathan Marshall, for a partial amount of the outstanding balance, using one of the credit cards on file. The transaction was declined. He informed me that you were experiencing technical difficulties with your bank and that you had authorized him to make the payment on your behalf. Could you please confirm this is correct? I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment. He hadn't come to apologize. He had come to stall. The folder, the letter, the performance of contrition, it was all a beautifully executed play to buy him enough time to try and circumvent the hold I had placed on the account. I didn't feel anger. I felt a deep, weary sadness. The hope that had flickered to life upon reading his letter died just as quickly, leaving behind nothing but cold ash. I sat there for a full 5 minutes, letting the truth of it settle into my bones. Then, I opened the financial dashboard I had created for my family's life. It was a simple interface, listing all the recurring payments I had been quietly covering for years. Mom's monthly prescription refills. Dad's truck insurance. Nathan's business credit card. Sophie's student loan payment, which I had taken over as an engagement gift. Their family cell phone plan. I moved my cursor over the first one. I paused. Then, one by one, I clicked the small button next to each item that read Disable. Click, 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 click. There was no drama. No final, angry phone call. Just the quiet, digital severing of ties that had long ago become chains. I didn't need revenge. I needed silence. For years, my phone had been a constant source of low-grade anxiety, a conduit for needs disguised as news. Now, for the first time, it was still. They were not entitled to a softer, more forgiving version of me just because the one they had created had finally broken. That night, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the lights of Portland glitter below. The silence in the room was vast and soft. It was not the silence of triumph, but the silence of a long, painful fever that had finally broken. But I knew it wouldn't last. Because when the giving finally stops, that's when the knocking truly begins. The first 3 days were a strange, hollow peace. Then the voicemails began. Mom was first, her voice thick with tears. "Cora, you are tearing this family apart," she whispered, her words a carefully crafted weapon of guilt. "This isn't who we are. This isn't what a family does." She never said, "I'm sorry." She never said, "We were wrong." She only said that I was the one doing the tearing. Dad didn't call. He sent a single text message, "You'll regret this." I didn't reply. I printed the message and taped it inside the folder Nathan had left me, right beneath his spreadsheet titled Cora's Contributions. It felt like the final piece of evidence, a perfect artifact of how they viewed me, not as a person, but as a function whose malfunction was a source of personal regret. The calls continued, a widening circle of familial obligation. Sophie's parents called, their tone a mixture of confusion and accusation. Then came a formal letter to my office from a lawyer I didn't recognize, Nathan's new lawyer. It was a request to negotiate repayment terms for the wedding expenses. Clarice, my lawyer, sent back a reply that was a masterpiece of brevity. Settlement of this matter is predicated on a full, public admission of financial misrepresentation and a formal withdrawal of all prior claims of familial contribution to the event. The response we received was not an agreement. It was a flurry of thinly veiled threats and bitter accusations, a cascade of finger-pointing that told me everything I needed to know. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were simply furious about the consequences. When a ship is going down, some people will search for a lifeboat. Others will search for the person who stopped failing. For 10 years, I had been in the bilge, bucketing out water with a smile while they hosted parties on the deck. The moment I set my bucket down, they screamed that I had let them drown. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just walked away. 6 months have passed. The silence that was once a novelty has become my new normal. I hear snippets of news through the grapevine of distant relatives. Nathan's business folded. He sold his new car to make rent. Sophie is working 2 jobs. My mother took a part-time position at a local nursery, tending to plants. My father, I'm told, is quieter now. They still live in the coastal house, my house, but it is no longer a bargaining chip, no longer theirs to give away. And me? I took a trip to Japan, something I'd dreamed of for years. I spent 2 weeks walking through ancient temples and neon-lit streets, feeling gloriously, wonderfully anonymous. I read books on my balcony, the scent of Portland's rain filling the air. I laugh loudly and freely with my friends. My business is thriving. Sometimes, in a quiet moment, I think about that wedding. I see the golden light on the vines, I hear the swell of the string quartet, and I feel the sting of that shared laugh, the one that was at my expense, not with me. And I remind myself that their laughter was real. Their perception of me was real. Therefore, this peace, this quiet, this distance, it has to be real, too. It is the necessary answer to their truth.